Never gonna be the best quarterback, but he'll never be the worst, and I feel like he is someone who's a winner because you talk about the San Francisco 49ers, the reason why it was so tough with him and Trey Lance is they drafted a guy because they thought Jimmy G was limited. Jimmy G kept playing well, and everyone loves him in the locker room. Good-looking
Mm,
guy, seems like he's a good teammate, and players
mm,
genuinely like him, and then he's familiar with Josh McDaniels, so when players like, "Hey, this," he can be like, kinda like, "Yeah," and he can simmer some of those things down in the locker room, which is kinda why it's almost a brilliant fit to bring a guy like that in there for 2 to 3 years, and maybe you can trade for, trade up, or sign a quarterback, and then you have Devontae, Jacoby Myers, Renfro, Michael Mayer, Josh Jacobs, if he doesn't hold out and miss any time, and then you have an elite pass rush. You have some
mhm.
great pass rushers. Swung on one in the draft, Tyree Wilson. And then you have Max Crosby, who's a monster. Chandler Jones still does his thing here and there. You'll see a sighting.
Yeah, and their quarterback that we saw, the rookie, Aiden O'Connell, they got him in, like, the 4th round.
Yeah,
He looked really good. Like, again, preseason, how much weight do you put on it? But when you have someone like that who's excelling, he played very well, against the 49ers defense, and they obviously have a lot more depth in the secondary than the Raiders do. But I was very impressed with what I saw with their quarterback, and you mentioned Jimmy Garoppolo. It's like, well, he's got 3 years. They can let this kid sit for, like, a year or 2 until he's ready, and then if they wanna move on from Jimmy G, they can, and in that meantime, he's not gonna, like, leave them out of games. It's not like he's gonna be so bad that they're gonna be out of games. Like, he'll have a couple stinkers, but overall, they'll still be competing.
yeah. And I can like safely say I think Jimmy Garoppolo is better than someone like Ryan Tannehill. I think
Oh,
he's a
yeah.
little bit I think game manager is a little harsh on him. I think like his peak is definitely like 12th best guy in the league. But the way people slander him, I'm like, no, I feel like that's definitely undeserved. He's not someone like to the level of like Baker Mayfield or Johnny Manziel.
Yeah, and I also think I would put him in, like, a I think he's relatively close to a Dak comp. I think a lot of people overrate Dak Prescott in the NFL. I think Dak is probably better than Jimmy G, but it's not that far away from each other. I would think Jimmy G is more of a winner.
For sure. And it's not like Dak hasn't had Zeke before. I mean, Jimmy G didn't have any amazing running backs in San Francisco until McCaffrey last year.
Hmm.
And then he gets hurt, and it was mostly Shanahan's offense. And I get that, but Dak has had some pretty good teams. He's had some really good defenses last year, and Dak couldn't beat Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
So it's like, I feel like him and Dak, it's like, take your pick. Dak doesn't get hurt as much, but
Absolutely. We'll pivot to Derek Carr leaving the Raiders. Obviously, he played against the Chiefs. He looked amazing. He also looks jacked. Looks like he put on about 15 pounds of muscle. Looking like a Hercules out there, but I know limited sets, but he looked like pretty electric for the Saints. And we saw Michael Thomas sighting. He looked really solid.
yeah.
I like what I saw from the Saints against the Chiefs.
Yeah, the Saints are a team I like when they're good in the NFL, and I've always been like a casual Derek Carr fan. So when Derek Carr is playing really well, I'll step out there and root for him. And I think there's a lot of drama with the Raiders. Last year, I felt like the Raiders were trying to move on from him for the past 3 years. He's finally free, has a huge chip on his shoulder, feels like he has something to prove. Michael Thomas comes back. Hopefully he can stay healthy, but nice to see him playing. But if Derek Carr can like really kick it up into gear, I think this team can be really good because you still have a great defense, still have good weapons, still have Taysom Hill. Still have
They
Taysom Hill.
they got some decent talent on offense. Alvin Kamara, although he'll be suspended for a portion of the season, I still think that he'll be effective for him. And they got Jamal Williams plus tight ends. Juwan Johnson played well for them last year. They obviously have Taysom Hill, who's this weird gadget guy that for some reason no defense can stop. Chris Olave, year 2, will he make that leap? So they got a lot of things going for them. Offensive line is somewhat of a question mark, but it played well against the Chiefs, and I'm excited to see this. I think they should be the favorites to win the division.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Falcons, Derek Carr is easily the best quarterback, and that's really what it's going to come down to. And especially if they can go out there and get someone like Kareem Hunt, which I think they should, um, just to plug in. But you still got Jamal Williams coming off a great year, and you have Olave um, and Michael Thomas, if they come back, are going to be a formidable duo. So hopefully the Saints pick it up.
Yeah, and then we had Jets and Panthers. We saw the first sighting of Bryce Young and Zach Wilson building upon the Hall of Fame game. My initial thoughts with Bryce Young, the stat line showed that he played pretty poorly, but I think what I saw with him is that he could stand in the pocket, deliver the ball, take the big hits. My concern for him, however, is that offensive line was awful against the Jets. I understand the Jets have a good defense, but if they got to protect Bryce Young if he's gonna stay healthy the whole season. He's a small guy. He took some pretty big hits yesterday, but I think he looked poised in the pocket, and I think he'll be solid. I just don't know if the talent around him is gonna be enough.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be really tough for Bryce Young because, like Shannon Sharp says, it's a lot harder to take those big hits and big sacks with people falling on you when you're not 6'2", 6'4", like Tom Brady or a Ben Roethlisberger. And his problem with Kyler Murray was like, yeah, this guy's gonna be perpetually hurt each year because it's literally just physics and
Hmm.
science. And I think with Bryce Young, they're gonna have to be very careful to protect him because they don't have a lot of explosive weapons on that team. You have Miles Sanders, who's probably going to fall off harder than any running back you've seen fall off before because he was always just kind of like, I feel like overrated in Philadelphia.
Hmm.
And then you have Thielen. I mean, this is like Eric Decker on the Jets, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then,
not the same player.
yeah, it's just like who's he gonna throw to? And if the offensive line is bad, he's just gonna get crushed because no one's gonna be open. And
Yeah,
boom, career over. It's like it sucks to say, but like he's gonna have to go through a lot, and they're gonna have to really revamp that offensive line. And Frank Reich has never proven he can be a head coach in the NFL because his stint with the Colts was an absolute disaster with the talent they gave him.